My name is Sarah Woodbury, and today we are talking about King Arthur.
You've written a book series about King Arthur, correct?
Yes, I have.
I've read some of your books.
Yes. Yes, I have, and I have a lot to say about him, a lot of which can't be conveyed in a 3 to 6 minute video, but we'll make a start. Perhaps the most important question that anyone asks about King Arthur right off is, did he exist?
Did King Arthur exist?
Yes. I say yes, yes.
Really, you're going to go there?
Whether or not King Arthur was a real person is, unfortunately, an either-or question. He either lived or he didn't. Many scholars, researchers, and Arthurophiles, as I might call myself, have strong opinions on this topic, both for and against. Because of the paucity of written records, much of the academic work has come down on the side of didn't. Or at least, if Arthur was a real person, his name was not Arthur, and he possibly wasn't even a king. I, however, look at the poetry and tales from the early Middle Ages and choose to believe that he did actually exist. Medieval people certainly thought he did, and throughout the Middle Ages, an entire body of work developed around his story, much of it mythologized. Historically speaking, however, there are genuine, near-contemporaneous references to him that predate the kinds of stories we read about now. The Round Table, the Holy Grail, and the Love Triangle are all later additions to the Arthurian story. First of all, we have Gildas, a 6th century Welsh cleric who wrote on the ruin and conquest of Britain and never mentions Arthur, even though he states that his own birth was in the year of the siege of Mount Badon. The fact that he does not mention Arthur and yet is our only chronicler of the 6th century is an example of why many historians assert that King Arthur never existed.
Who was Gildas? What was his agenda?
So Gildas was a monk. Even in the 6th century, Gildas was looking to reform the church by the dissolution of both kings and other monks like him. And so what he chose to talk about is specifically targeted, in many cases, towards that. In particular, his concern was about how kings and other religious people, monks in particular, were dissolute and were not following the teachings of the church. So he'll rail against this king or that king because they didn't do good things in favor of sort of his favorites. But then we have a 6th century Welsh bard, Taliasen, making him a contemporary of Arthur too. He wrote several poems about Arthur and his adventures with his men, and this is the first real source of the Arthurian legend. One poem goes, "Before the door of the gate of hell the lamp was burning, and when we went with Arthur, a splendid labor, except 7, none returned from Caer Fedwyd." Shortly thereafter we have a Gathodin, a Welsh poem by the 7th century poet Anarin. He mentions Arthur in passing while talking about the Battle of Catraeth fought around AD 600. He writes about the battle's leader, who fed black ravens on the ramparts of a fortress, though he was no Arthur. I get chills when I read that. In the 9th century, another bard, Nennius, wrote the history of the Britons and states, "Then it was that the magnanimous Arthur, with all the kings and military force of Britain, fought against the Saxons, and though there were many more noble than himself, yet he was 12 times chosen their commander, and was as often conqueror." This work is contemporaneous with many native Welsh tales collected in the Mabinogion. This includes the story of Cilchog and Olwen, in which Arthur and his men track down the 13 treasures of Britain, and the Dream of Rhonabwy, a tale of Arthur that takes place after the Battle of Camlan, indicating that he survived it. Finally, the Annals Cambriae is a Welsh chronicle compiled no later than the 10th century, and which consists of a series of dates, 2 of which mention Arthur. Year 72, the Battle of Badon, in which Arthur carried the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ on his shoulders for 3 days and 3 nights, and the Britons were victors. And the year 93, the strife of Camlan, in which Arthur and Midraite fell. What I see here in denying Arthur's existence is a modern bias towards the writers of prose, Gildas, over the work of the bards. If you read Gildas's work, you come to realize very quickly that he wasn't writing a history as we know it today and had a clear agenda. Historically, however, the bards of Wales were the repository and keepers of knowledge. We should not dismiss what they wrote just because it comes to us as poetry. Next week, we'll be talking about perhaps the most famous site associated with King Arthur, Tintagel. Thanks for watching my video. You can click on the playlist or subscribe to my channel to see more. There'll be a new video next week. If you want to check out my books, click on the link to my webpage.